Right. Okay. So those of you who maybe didn't hear that, I think you had a couple questions in there, Paul. One was about sort of why the boundary where it is, and maybe then from there, sort of, you know, how do we ensure consistency around what we might undertake through Pensima with what might happen on our other coasts or elsewhere in BC? Is that okay? So just to give you a bit of history around how we got to this boundary. My understanding is that the intention behind identifying Pensima as opposed to saying let's do this for the entire coast is that there was a bit of sort of a pilot approach taken, given that integrated management is something that's new. Before we try and sort of get it right for everywhere, can we sort of run, if you like, run it at a slightly smaller scale that allows us to learn some lessons and take off bite-sized pieces, even though Pensima is still huge and from many perspectives a very large area to be dealing with. It also reflects to some extent a boundary that captures similar sort of oceanographic characteristics. So it follows sort of the edge of the shelf on the west coast and then stops at a certain point on the southern boundary to capture an area, without being a scientist, that is somewhat contiguous with respect to certain oceanographic characteristics. Now the second part of your question was, you know, this sort of consistency piece. I think it's important to sort of refer back to the idea that we have a certain piece of legislation, we have a Canada's ocean strategy, and then even under Canada's ocean strategy, there is another piece of policy that is specific to integrated management. And I think, you know, those are always going to be the backdrops that will be quite important to ensuring that whatever we do here, compared to what's getting developed for similar kinds of integrated management processes that are happening in the Arctic as well as on the East Coast, to ensure that there's some consistency across those things. At a more detailed level, it's also important to those who are involved in the Pensima initiative to be working and developing relationships to, for example, West Coast Aquatic, who are undertaking another kind of integrated management exercise to the south. What can we do to ensure that whatever we develop through Pensima has some sort of continuity and relationship to what West Coast Aquatic may be developing for the west coast of Vancouver Island? Like, these kinds of relationships and considerations are important, and so it becomes incumbent on us to sort of develop some of those ties that allow that to happen.
Sorry, thanks for that.
Extending it out? Yeah, well, I guess it's again, it's that idea that let's start with working with this area and see what we can develop here. The intention is explicit in the ocean strategy that we do this for all of Canada's oceans. So as we sort of learn, there may be opportunities, in the future where we take on planning at a larger scale. But because we're sort of early, I think the intention is to start with these pilot areas. The pilot on the west coast is Pensima. Yeah, sorry. Okay, well, without having been involved in any of the previous ones, I mean, what I would say is that as much as there may have been previous attempts at things that are related to this, we are working with, you know, legislation and policy that, you know, this is our first crack at it with respect to those pieces of guidance. The second thing is, again, I come back to my earlier point about, you know, it's in large part about developing a good process. So if we have not only the right sort of stakeholders and interested parties at the table, but we're also engaging governments in the right way, we come to a product that has that broad support, which acts as a push for implementation. The other important piece here, though, is that the Oceans strategy actually says right in it that the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans is responsible for leading and facilitating the development of these plans. So the plans themselves are the department's responsibility to implement. So, well, I mean, I think that's beyond the scope of this. So.
And so we're looking to this group, actually, to help to develop the solutions. Well, I can only tell you that when we did our sort of pre-workshop interviews, like everybody that I spoke to is really committed to making this work. And so in that spirit, I'd like to kind of move forward. We've got a bit of a process here, and we need to kind of build the basis for an informed discussion moving forward. So got 2 more questions, and then we've got to turn it over to Gary because we're moving in, we're cutting into his time here. So I think you had a quick question, and then one over here.
That boundary came out of Ottawa, did not come out of here. People here are saying